Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Backlog Bunker. You may have noticed there wasn't an episode last week. I forgot. Anyway, really quickly I want to talk about Star Fox. 64 is a great game, there's not really much else to say about it. I think its two biggest strengths are spectacle and control. Spectacle because, space is really cool, dogfights are really cool, it's a bunch of space dogfights. Top Gun, but it's in space, is a really good selling point for any video game, even more so if it's a rail shooter, and this is a really good rail shooter. Mechanically, it's just deep enough to be interesting without being overly complicated, because, I know everyone hates the Blue Marine, and it definitely doesn't control nicely, but compared to a game like Steel Diver, I had much more fun controlling the Blue Marine because it was Star Fox but a little bit different. And given that the controls of Star Fox are pretty straightforward, but allow you to still have control over what happens in the moment-to-moment gameplay, unlike some other rail shooters, which isn't necessarily a complaint about them, just a praise of Star Fox, it ends up being a pretty tense and fun experience even when you're not doing well. Because in a dogfight, yeah, you're gonna fuck up sometimes, that's what adds to the intensity, the danger. To compare it to my other beloved rail shooter experience, I like Kid Icarus Uprising more as a whole, because that game just has other things going on that isn't just the rail shooting, but in terms of just the rail shooting parts of the game, 64 is my new favorite. Though I have yet to play Sin and Punishment and its sequel, so I'll see when I get around to those. The only other thing about Star Fox 64 is that so far I've only done the hard route, because after beating it, I did the same thing for 64 3D to see how they compared. And basically what it came down to for me was that while 64 3D isn't a bad way to play the game, especially if you have no access to the original or to the PC port, it is by no means the way I would recommend someone play the game, because while it looks better fidelity-wise, just, having better models and such, the smaller screen just makes it hard to see things like the fine details. I already had a hard enough time trying to shoot guys that were behind my teammates on the 64 version. Doing it in the 3DS version was way harder because they were way smaller. And also just the 3DS controls in general, smaller for the hands, not as fun to use. If I was talking purely about the original 64 version versus 3D, then I'd say it's a bit of a toss-up between the two. I probably prefer the 64 version, but again, 3D isn't a bad way to play the game. But when you throw the PC port in there, then it becomes not even the definitive way to play the game, because it's obviously the PC port. The biggest plus that 3D has going for it is that you can switch the Y-axis controls to have up go up and down go down, but you can also just do that manually in the PC port for 64 by switching your up and down inputs. So what I'm basically getting at is that you should play the PC port of Star Fox 64. It's a great game, especially since it doesn't cost $50 on a whole new console. Speaking of, that brings me to my other topic, which is that I played Final Fantasy VIII, and it wasn't very good. I wrote a whole fucking thing about it on Backloggd, but the TLDR is that junctioning is just the materia system, but more convoluted, more time expensive, and less interesting. And beyond that, the game is just a big waste of time, because there's level scaling, which means that you don't have to do any fighting, ever. You just grind up magic to put into the junction system, and then the game plays itself. It was wholly uninteresting, and the story wasn't very good, so I quit. 9, on the other hand, was much closer to what I wanted, but with a few caveats. The unfortunate reality is that 9 is much closer to a Final Fantasy VII in terms of games that I somewhat enjoy than a Final Fantasy V, or even 3, or even really 1. And then even in comparison to 7, there are different things that I dislike about 9. 7 was a game I disliked because the characters didn't really matter in gameplay, and ATB sucks despite the materia system being really cool. 9 is a game I dislike because the whole metagame with abilities and all that isn't very interesting, and ATB still sucks, despite the fact that I like that the characters are unique again. The metagame carries over some of the good parts from Final Fantasy VII, namely that equipment is more than just the stats it gives you, but that more in question is really just the ability system, and with abilities really is just, do they have an ability you want them to have? No? Then give it to them. And once they have it, take that equipment off and give them something else. Whereas 7's more was the materia system, and it wasn't always just working towards getting materia to max level, because there's always something more to do with it. I'm still enjoying myself, so I'm still struggling a little bit with which I like more between the two, but I'm probably just gonna be leaning closer to 7. 9 is a lot closer to my tastes aesthetically, because I like classic fantasy, the visuals are better, the characters have more to say that I find interesting, and the aforementioned character roles actually exist. Not to say the characters in 7 don't have anything interesting to say, but more so that it only ever really happens in their part of the game. Like, Cid's a cool character, but outside of Rocket Town, the Return to Rocket Town, and the part in Disc 2 where you have to control him, does he ever really talk all that much? In comparison, the 4 characters you basically start out with in 9 are all still saying something interesting 7 hours into the game, and Zidane is probably my favorite Final Fantasy protagonist, period. Though to be fair, there's not much competition between the non-characters like 1 and 3, and the bad characters like 8. But at the end of the day, none of that matters because the moment-to-moment gameplay is worse than 7, because battles are so much slower. If I didn't already hate ATB, I definitely hate it now. ATB moves at a snail's pace even when you put it to the max speed setting. The animations are just too long. Even before you start the battle, there's this long loading screen of just black, and then even when the battle actually starts, it has to do all this camera panning bullshit that takes way too long. I said it before, but I find it ludicrous that people found ATB to be a more engaging or fast-paced version of normal turn-based combat, when this is just longer. There is far more waiting in this ATB game specifically than any turn-based game I've ever played in my life. You may or may not remember that problem I had with Final Fantasy VI, where the final boss has animations that are so long that I would pick an option for one of my characters that wouldn't end up being relevant for another minute. That happens in normal battles in this game. Like I said, I'm enjoying myself for now, but I cannot wait to be done with 9, if for no other reason than because I'll never have to see ATB again. Until, of course, I play Chrono Trigger, but, that can wait. Then the real nail in the coffin in comparison to 7 is that limit breaks are just way worse in 9, because now they're called trances, but unlike limit breaks from 7, you can't carry them in between battles, and somewhat like 8, you don't have any control over when it actually activates. Aside from the scripted time it happens earlier in the game, I have not had it proc during a single boss fight. It has only ever been during random battles that were basically already over. Actually, no, there's one time I had it proc during a boss fight, and it was when you're fighting the Grotto boss fight, but it was Vivi's who activated it, which meant that I could only get one spell off and it wasn't even useful anyway. Which, to be fair, is more a symptom of ATB sucking than of trances sucking, but the point is that I didn't get anyone else's trance. Anyway, that's it for all the gaming bullshit. Now for the weekly topic, of which I'll do two because I didn't do one last week. The first one is short because it's kind of self-explanatory, which is Yoshi P said some bullshit about it remaking Final Fantasy 6, 8, or 9 would, on the scale of the 7 remake, would be way too long and it would be across 5 installments, so they're never gonna do it. And a lot of people defending this statement are defending the part where he said, because it's 5 installments, we're never gonna do it, and they're like, guys, they're not actually gonna make a 5 installment FF6 remake, calm down. But what these people seem to misunderstand is that the problem with the statement was not the fact that he said the FF6 remake would be a 5 installment game. Obviously he's not going to do that. The problem is that he thinks an FF6 remake would be a 5 installment game. You could make every single town and city in FF6 as big as one of the towns or cities in FF7 remake, and it still wouldn't even be close to 5 installments. It probably wouldn't even reach 1 installment. Because if all you do is expand the story, expand the scope, and change the combat system somewhat, the game is maybe twice as long, 3 times if you're really pushing it. The reason the FF7 remake project is so long is because they keep adding bullshit to it. The FF7 remake could absolutely have been 1 installment if we didn't keep adding stupid bullshit in, like Roche, or the fucking Bowl, or whatever it's called in Chapter 17 in Remake, or all the everything that happens in Rebirth. How is it possible that Rebirth is so much longer than its equivalent content in Disc 1 of Final Fantasy 7, but Rocket Town got completely cut? Oh, I know why. It's because instead of Costa del Sol just being a town you visit on the adventure of Final Fantasy VII, it turned into an entire chapter of minigame bullshit. Or because instead of doing Red's backstory like any normal person would, we attached an entire other section of bullshit onto it. I say all this to say that an FF6 remake would not be 5 installments long, because a real FF6 remake would not add some fucker on a motorcycle who only exists to give Terra one-on-one fights. The same obviously applies to 8 or 9, but I didn't finish 8, and I'm only partially through 9. However, I'm confident in saying that the Windmill Village in 9 does not need to be a 3-hour chapter. Then, as for the other topic, a bunch of people are planning to do a PlayStation boycott in regards to the whole disc thing. And to that I say, good luck. Not because I don't support the boycott, obviously I do, but I just don't think it's going to do anything, and I'm not participating. The two main factors for why I think it's not going to work are, for one, there's just going to be too few people participating, because these are people who have to both know that the boycott exists and also care enough to participate. On top of the assumption that they are sympathetic to the cause and even own a PlayStation in the first place. You can't exactly boycott something you don't already use. Hell, I have a PlayStation and I still wouldn't even really be able to boycott, because I only ever use it when I'm playing a PlayStation game, which I'm not currently. Then the other big factor for why it's not going to work is because I don't know if everyone's seen the leak from inside of Sony that went out to a lot of its employees, but their explicit plan right now is to not acknowledge any of the backlash and just wait for it to blow over. Sony is essentially gambling on the fact that once this all blows over, everything will be back to normal, at least from their perspective. Now, whether or not you think it's a gamble they should take is irrelevant. That's the gamble they think they should take. Meaning that if literally every single PlayStation owner on Earth boycotted tomorrow for an entire week, they would still be fine with it. Now, as for why I'm not participating, I kind of already said it. Call me pessimistic, but I just don't think that doing the boycott's gonna do anything, because I don't think Sony's gonna reverse the decision. Like I said, it is their explicit plan to not reverse the decision, and to ignore all backlash. This doesn't exactly mean that I'm just letting Sony do whatever they want though. No, not even close. Alls I'm saying is, when 2028 rolls around, I won't have any more PlayStation games to buy, and nothing I play is online or digital, so I'm disconnecting my PS5 from the internet completely and never buying a PlayStation game ever again. Because even if PS6 games are cross-gen, they won't be physical, so I won't be buying them. The only things I'll lose access to are my copy of Horizon Zero Dawn, which I don't really care about because I have it on physical anyway. It was a gift, I didn't buy it. And potentially my Marvel Midnight Suns DLC, but that's only if DLC does the same online checking thing that digital games do, which I'm not sure they do. The boycott now is pointless because Sony thinks that 2028 will roll around and all will be well. But, at least as far as people like me are concerned, when 2028 rolls around, things will go from a slow and small trickle of money every now and then to no money ever, period. Let's say that Sony is a crack addict. All a boycott is going to do is slowly transition them into using a softer drug. But with my method, they're going to learn the hard way when they go cold turkey. But what about when they release insert game here? Masahiro Sakurai could get up in front of me during a state of play and be like, I'm just making Kid Icarus Uprising 2 for PlayStation, fuck you. And if it was digital only, I still wouldn't buy it. A lot of my favorite games are in series that could continue, but I mean it when I say that there is not a single game that could possibly come out that would ever get me to buy a game on a PS6. You're either on a disc or you're on PC. That's it. Now get out of here.